Good morning, Ajahn. Thank you.
Morning.
Good morning. Thank you, Ajahn, for coming to the BSV this morning. Ajahn has been at Newbury for the last few days, and Ajahn got to take short his weekend stay at Newbury to come down to BSV. I'm sorry to advise that Sunim Chikwan is not available to come in today. She needs some rest in Kingsland. So we will schedule for Sunim to come and teach one of the following Sundays, next few Sundays, and it will be published in the weekly email. Thank you, Ajahn, for stepping in the last minute. Just a quick short announcement. I forgot to add in last weekly email, for the summer season, we have started with the Friday night meditation, and it is led by lay experienced teacher Sandip Kaki. So it will also start from 7:30 to 9 o'clock. It's for both beginners and experienced. So for those interested, please come along. We are considering, we are not too sure yet, but we are talking, maybe we might start with the meditation on Saturday, but we will confirm it and see how things work it out. It will be led by a monastery. In case some of you may have tried to communicate with Newbury over the last few days, occasionally they have electricity outstage, and when that happens, you got no telephone, no computer connections over there. So you may try to ring Newbury. If you try to contact Newbury sometimes, and if there's no one picking up the phone, it could be very likely there's electricity outstage there. So you can always email BSU office or Newbury office, and when power's resumed, they will reply to you. I think the other one is also the refurbishment of the Sangha House and the Kutis at Newbury. It was published in last BSV Weekly Update. We have, at this stage, the total collections we need is about 160,000. I think we're halfway there already. So we need about 86,000 to finish off the internal joinery works, carpentries, earthworks, some of the kitchen setup and fittings too as well. So if you know of anyone who is willing to offer some dana to do the internal fittings and earthworks at the Kutis and Sangha House, please let us know or email the office. We hope to finish it off by February. I was there up at Newbury last week. The building progress is very good. In fact, we are ahead of time. We should finish with all the work. We try to finish with all the building works, external works, and including plastering and paintings by January or even early February. So at this stage, they are starting to work on the internal joineries and all the carpentry works. In December. In fact, they have started with some of them already now. So most of the work will be starting in December too. So any sort of donations towards the joinery will certainly help. The Buddha Rupa is currently being casted in Thailand, so we have collected sufficient enough in money to pay off for the Buddha Rupa. So that should be shipped to us sometimes in March. So things are going well. Thank you to all the supporters locally or here overseas and interstates too as well. But we try to put all our hands together to allow us to get through this last hurdle. Bhante have been there a few days, and Bhante might update some of the progress there. So I shall pass to Savitri to make the request. Thank you.
Thank you, Adrian. Yes, indeed. Newbury, the monastery at Newbury is developing well. The monks area is, the kutis and so on, developing very well. I looked at them, and they're very suitable, and I think they'll be warm enough. That's the test case. That's right. Underfloor heating in slab heating in 2 buildings, and under tile heating in the kutis. So that we'll see how it goes. But very interesting. When we had those stormy winds, Adrian was mentioning there was an outage in terms of power. No heating for one night. Wow, was that chilly without that? So,
what if it's in winter?
Yeah. If it was in winter, good grief, it would be really poor. Test of
Dhamma.
Yeah, test of Dhamma, exactly, and test of your understanding of dukkha vedana. painful feeling, whether you react to it or you're very frightened by it or whatever. So now the first thing is going to be the taking the precepts, and I think Savitri will ask. We're doing it in Pali, I think, this time. We did last time English.
Mayam Bhante Tisarnena Saha Pancha Silani Yachama Dutiyampi Mayam Bhante Tisarnena Saha Pancha Silani Yachama Tatiyampi Mayam Bhante Tisarnena Saha Pancha Silani Yachama.
Sadhu. And our request is, we request the 3 refuges and the 5 precepts, Bhante, and once, twice, and 3 times. So I'll do the Namo Tassa 3 times, and then after that, if you'd like to repeat it, and then I will do the refuges line by line, and if you repeat that. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Buddhaṃ saranang gacchāmi, Dhammaṃ saranang gacchāmi, Sanghaṃ saranang gacchāmi, Dutiyampi buddhaṃ saranang gacchāmi, Dutiyampi Dhammaṃ saranang gacchāmi, Dutiyampi Sanghaṃ saranang gacchāmi, Tatiyampi buddhaṃ saranang gacchāmi, Tatiyampi Dhammaṃ saranang gacchāmi, Tatiyampi Sanghaṃ saranang gacchāmi, Tisarana gamanang nititaṃ, Panatipata veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami. Adinadana veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami. Kame sumichachara veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami. Musawada veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami. Sura Merya Majapamadatana veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. So that's taking the 3 refuges and the 5 precepts. Very important part of the Buddhist practice, actually. Not just taking it, but keeping it. That's the practice. So now we can do the recollection of the Buddha, Dhamma and the Sangha, and we do this together in Pali. Iti piso bhagava arahang samma sambuddho Vijacharana Sampanno Sugato Lokavidu Anuttaro Purisa Dhamma Sarati Sattadeva Manusanam Buddho Bhagavati Swakato Bhagavata Dhammo Sanditiko Akaliko Ehipasiko Opanaiko Pachatang Veditabo Vinyuiti Supatipanno Bhagavato Sawaka Sangho Ujjupatipanno Bhagavato Sawaka Sangho Nyayapatipanno Bhagavato Sawaka Sangho Samicipatipanno Bhagavato Sawaka Sangho Yanidam Chattari Purisa Yugani Atta Purisa Pugala Esa Bhagavato Sawaka Sangho Ahuneyo Pahuneyo Dakineyo Anjali Karaniyo Anuttarang Punya Ketang Lokasati. Oh, there we go. And now we can do the Buddha's words on loving kindness, the Karaniya Metta Sutta. Karaniya Mata Kusalena Yang Tang Santang Padang Abhisamecha Sakko Unjuja Sujuja Suancho Chasamudu Timani Santu Sakko Chasubaroja Appakicho Chasalahukahuti Tindriyo Chanipako Je Appagabo Kuleso Ananugindo Nachakundang Samachare Kinchi Yena Vinyu Pare Upavadeyung Sukino Wake Mino Hontu Sambe Satta Pavantu Sukitata Ye ke chipana bhutati tasawa tavarawa anavasesa digawa ye mahantawa majjima rasaka anakatula ditawa ye va adita ye chalure vasanti abhidure. Oh. Putawa sambhave siva samde satta bhavantu sukhitata naparo parang nikubeta nati manyeta kata chinang kanchi vyarozana patiga sanya nanya manya saduk kamicheya Mata yatani yang puttang ayusa kaputamanurake evam pisambhabutesu manasambhavaye aparimanang mettancha sambhalokasmin manasambhavaye aparimanang Udang adochatiriyancha asambadang averang asapatang titancarang nisino va sayano va yavatasa vigatamido etang sating aditeya brahmametang viharang idamahu Ditincha anupagama sila vatasanena sampano kame suvinaya gedhang nahi jatu gambaseyang punareti. Sadhu, 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 sadhu. Sorry for turning the page too soon. I realised when I thought, oh my goodness, we're not up to that. Right. So That's it. Oh. So there we are, very good. So, Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Buddhang Dhammang Sanghang Namassami. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. So this morning I'd like to give a talk, a very topical talk. I'm sure many people think about this, or you do hear a lot about it, which is the subject I thought for today is, why is the world in the state it is in? Why is the world in the state it is in? I think many people ask that question, don't they? They look at the world and they think, wow, my goodness, is it getting worse? Do people think it's getting worse? Many people think it's getting worse. And I'm not so sure. I think at all times, when you read the Buddha's discourses, these are suttas, his teachings, and also the Vinaya, this is the rules of discipline for the monks and nuns, you see people doing all sorts of things. You think nobody would do that with a fully enlightened being around who can read minds and know what's going on. But they did, and all manner of things that, even today I think would be somewhat shocking. But I think one of the things we have today, and maybe things are declining, certainly I think values are declining, one could say. And certainly the influence of religion, often values and religion go together. And they don't have to, but they tend to. So one could say that. But I think the state of the world now is probably not that. The background to it is probably not that different from the time of the Buddha. The causes and conditions for the things that were happening at the time of the Buddha are the same as are happening now. People may not agree with that. But I think what's different now is we know so much more. And what's more, we can see the video of things happening just when they happen, whatever it is. So we have a lot more exposure to what's going on in the world. And many people find that actually quite negative, don't they? Because we see all this violence and we see terrible things happening on the internet and through television and everything. But really, this time in history is actually a really important time, because even though greed, hatred and delusion are still with us, and they were there at the time of the Buddha, these days we face, the world is facing two very big challenges, which are make or break, aren't they? Make or break. And that's the environment when climate change, that's make or break. And also nuclear war, if that happens, that's make or break. So even though greed, hatred and delusion were around at the time of the Buddha, there was wars, there were atrocities, there were massacres, there were all these sorts of things. There were intrigues, people tried to kill the Buddha even. But it wasn't going to lead to the end of the human species necessarily. It wasn't going to lead to the end of the world as we know it. It's quite interesting. Some people say to me in a very detached way, well, maybe we're facing another extinction of another species. Homo sapiens, human beings. I thought, wow, that's pretty detached. So, but this is what we find. These two things I feel are very, very important things to face. They're the ones that are threatening us. And sure, I think there are declining ethical standards, as I mentioned, because often ethics, this sense of what's right and wrong, is associated with religion. And to quite a large extent, particularly in the West, religion is going down. And so those ethical standards can go down as well. And also some political ideologies reject ethics as well. And certainly we can see in this world, a lot of the mental suffering that's happening in the world is pretty obvious to people. it's getting depressing, isn't it? Getting depressing. But it's true. People's reaction to, when they know so much, their reaction can either be depression or anger. So you can see a lot of that. And, I witness, even here as a monk, I hear people, talking about what's going on in Sri Lanka, and they can get very angry and upset and all this sort of, it doesn't matter where you are, it's the same. Or they can get very depressed about it. And it gives rise to problems. Depression is a very big problem in the world, I think, but anxiety is also another one. And what is a worrying indication of the difficulties of the world, lack of wisdom in the world, is suicide rates are going up. As far as I understand, they're going up. And it's very sad when we see young people, committing suicide. And it's largely because of a lack of, values, a lack of wisdom, and lack of experience at that time. And the Buddha had very nice images for what we experience here. I was going to get the passage and quote from it, but I didn't have time. But he talked about how our existence is like we are blinded by ignorance. We don't know. And we're fettered, we're imprisoned by craving, wanting, which we think is going to bring happiness. And we hurry and we rush and hurry through samsara, this endless cycle of rebirths, again and again and again, because we don't know what's going on. We haven't got the bigger picture, as we say, and we think that this wanting, this craving, it's our friend. It's going to bring us happiness. It's going to bring us fulfillment, and of course, all it brings us is a new life, and many disappointments actually along the way. But when the other thing that I've reflected on a more positive side, when people came to the Buddha and they heard his teachings, usually for the first time, they often would, say sadhu, 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 and then they'd give this standard passage where they'd say, it's like you're pointing out the way to someone who's lost. Something that was upside down, you've righted it up, you've put it up the right way. It's like someone who's in the dark, you've brought a light that shows a person who can see, who's got eyes, what's going on. And this is very much what the Buddha's teaching is doing, but it's doing it from wisdom. As I mentioned, the really, you could say it's a very simplistic way of looking at our current situation, but it goes to the heart of it really, that it's greed, hatred and delusion are the villains of the piece. Last week I gave a talk on greed. Is greed is good? Is that true? Which is quite a challenge for Buddhists, because you just hear, greed is good? What? And I mentioned last week, I'll talk about each of those. I'm doing it for the teens group, because I think that age group, these are very important sort of areas for them to sort of get a handle on, handle on. So I will deal with hatred and delusion in more detail. But part of delusion actually is, people say, well, what is delusion? Then we have an ignorance about delusion already, isn't it? It's a vague term, actually. But delusion is that it is ignorance. It's not seeing things, not knowing how things are. And it enables greed, it enables hatred. Because we think there are things that are worth being greedy for. We think there are things that are worth hating. We have to do something. We've got to protect. We have to fight. And so hatred and greed are enabled by this quality of delusion. And I'll go into a lot of detail when I talk about delusion. But basically, delusion, as I'll talk about now, is the opposite of right view. It's the opposite of wisdom. It's the opposite of understanding how things really are. And a big part of that is right view. We hear about right view in Buddhism a lot. This is a samadhi. And in actual fact, it's really what made the Bodhisattva, the Buddha, was the right view, the wisdom that he developed, that he experienced. He wasn't doing it as a theory or as a philosophy. Recently people have been telling me, Buddhism is a philosophy, it's not a religion. I said, it's neither. It's a way of life. Because I think philosophers, they talk about or think about things a lot, but do they actually do it? I don't know. I may be ignorant of the way of philosophy, but that's what I feel. Some wonderful thoughts, but does it translate into action? And religion always buys into rituals and things like that, not necessarily leading to understanding. But practice is what, a way of life is something we put into practice. So this is what the Buddha is interested in. The trouble with the Buddha's teaching is that they're so beautiful and so philosophically satisfying that people can just be satisfied with that level, because everything hangs together so well, fits together so well. So there can be that degree of intellectual satisfaction, intellectual happiness with the Buddha's teaching. But the Buddha would say that's not enough. An example, of course, is, the Dhamma verse about the spoon that's stirring the soup. It never tastes the soup. And in the same way, someone who has an intellectual understanding of the teachings and really enjoys that is not really tasting the soup, which comes from actually practicing the Buddha's teachings. And so the Buddha said, and this is, if you wonder how people can do what they do in the world, you think of all these terrorist attacks. I gave a talk on terrorism and in Sri Lanka shortly after the bombings in Sri Lanka, where some hotels were blown up and some churches were blown up. And of course, how can people do a thing like that? Because they have a wrong view of how things are. They think this is a good thing to do. Amazing, isn't it? Extraordinary. Most people, even if they don't have a religion, couldn't think like that. How can you do something terrible like that and get a good result? It's a very odd way of thinking. And I myself thought, when I heard the news, I thought, my goodness, those suicide bombers are in for a surprise. When they blow themselves up, the next thing, they'll find themselves in a state that matches the state of their mind, matches the state of their actions, this carnage, this destruction. And so in Buddhism we'd say that's definitely a quick way to a hell state. And it's creating hell on earth, so it's a good beginning for the next life. But the Buddha said, and I think this bears out what I was just saying, that there is no single factor so responsible for the arising of unwholesome states as wrong view. That makes wrong actions like terrorist bombings possible, and many other things, wars, and no factor so helpful for the arising of wholesome states as right view. And then he says, there is no single factor so responsible for the suffering of living beings as wrong view, and no factor so potent in promoting the good of living beings as right view. So where we're coming from is so important to how we act, how we speak in the world. And this is so fundamental, but it's so often we don't really look at what our views are. They're almost buried in our minds. They've almost become a part of our landscapes, the landscape of our minds. So we don't see them. These attitudes, these assumptions about life are very deep. They're very deep beliefs. They're not shallow beliefs. They may have been things that we learnt in childhood, that we believe about the world. We haven't actually tested them often, and we haven't really looked at them and gone into them. But these views determine, to a large extent, how we experience the world, the way we look at it. If we have a negative view of humanity and the potential for humanity to solve its problems, the world's going to look very dark, very depressing. So these things, view is very important for us. It'd be good if we could get a better word in English for it, wouldn't it? That belief comes quite close to it, I think. That's not bad. It's more than an opinion, because opinions seems very superficial. But an assumption is closer to it, I think, that we run on. And I always like to point out too that the Buddha when he became enlightened, this is what he experienced, wasn't it? Before he was, when he was on the way to enlightenment, he saw his past lives. He saw the way beings pass on due to their actions in this life to another life. He saw these things from his own experience. And as I mentioned, the Buddha is not mentioning these things as a theory. They're his experience of reality. They may not be our experience of reality, not yet, but he's encouraging us to look in these areas. So he is giving us the full picture, the big picture, from an enlightened being's mind. And it's very important to also understand right, when we say right view, some people, actually now I don't feel it so much, think, oh, what's so right about right view? It sounds a bit exclusive, doesn't it, And I remember the first time I heard of right view was when I wasn't a Buddhist then. I think it was 1977 in Malaysia in a temple. And I saw they had the Noble Eightfold Path written down, and it's right view and right thought and right speech. And I thought, what makes this right? Because we have an idea of in the West quite often that right and wrong are very relative terms. Right and wrong are very relative terms. So for me, I said right, and I think, well, surely you can't say that for everyone. But as I practiced, and that's my understanding deep, I realise it's right in the sense that it leads to awakening. It's right in the sense that it's a complete or a full description of, say, view. So in those senses, it's more of a functional definition. It's not saying right, because often we think right is better than somebody else. It's a one-upmanship too. So this is the point of it, that it leads, it's right for awakening. If we want to become enlightened, good, then practice this path. If you don't want to, you don't need to practice it. So, and it's very important because this right view too is, as I say, for us it's a representation of reality. For the Buddha, it was an experience. And as Buddhists, it's not necessarily our experience. Some of it we can experience actually. Some of it we can understand already in this life. But as we develop the path, we understand more and more of it and become our experience too. It's not just brainwashing. The Buddha really encouraged us to investigate these things. He wasn't into belief is not enough. Belief is not enough. But we must have a certain confidence in order to undertake the teachings. And the Buddha is giving us the areas to look in. So we will look at right view in a minute, actually, some of the parts of right view. I usually say that it's right view is like a reality check. If we find there's a lot of suffering and difficulty in our life, it's good for us to check up in what way we are in opposition to reality, what's happening, what's going on in our life. Because that's really what, all these difficulties we experience in life are all about. Just seeing where we, are not able to see reality for what it is and to deal with it in the best possible way. And of course this teaching, I'll mention it later, is the essence of the Four Noble Truths, that we have problems and difficulties, but we don't know the solution, the origin of these difficulties. We think it's wanting things to be the way we want, or trying to get rid of things that we don't want. In actual fact, that's causing the problem. But that's a teaching that the Buddha gave, and that all the Buddhas teach actually. And it's something that for many of us is, counterintuitive. Because as I say, we think wanting, craving, desiring is our best friend, and it's going to deliver what we want, happiness, and what we're looking for in life. So this is also, the right view is also the meaning of life. People are always looking for meaning of life, the meaning and purpose in life. And the right view is pointing us towards that, actually. And it's a roadmap of we need to travel in terms of wisdom, the sorts of areas we can develop insights into are the sorts of areas that will be helpful for us to become enlightened. So as I say, there's two types of view the Buddha talked about. The right view, so that's samaditthi, and then of course the wrong view, micchaditthi. It's quite interesting. The Buddha taught there's a Noble Eightfold Path, and there's the Samma, like Samma, the right Noble Eightfold Path, and then there's Miccha, Noble Eightfold Path. It's not noble. It's the wrong Eightfold Path. So this is the wrong view and right view. Right view is the experience of the Buddha, his experience of reality, and leads to awakening. Wrong view isn't coming from understanding reality as it is. It's out of step with it. And a very good check for wrong view is it'll bring problems in our lives. We'll find difficulties in our lives. There'll be a lot of shoulds or it shouldn't in our lives. These words, when we use should a lot, or when we use shouldn't, it's a good indicator we're out of tune with reality, actually, because we're trying to demand that life should be like this, and it isn't. There's that famous story of Ajahn Chah's, which I'm sure you've heard many, many times, of the monk in Thailand, New Zealand monk, who had a bad knees from a motorbike accident when he was young, and he had an operation for it, and the doctor said, in a few weeks the pain will go down, you should be walking within 2 weeks. I think they tried to get them walking sooner now. And 2 weeks came, and of course he was still in pain and he wasn't walking. And then Ajahn Chah came to him, and this monk complained bitterly. He said, it shouldn't be like this. They said I'd be walking, I'd be out of pain, And Ajahn Chah, being Ajahn Chah, doesn't say the things you'd like him to say. Poor thing, yes, poor dear, yeah, you'll get better, don't worry. He said, if it shouldn't be like this, it wouldn't be like this. It's true. It's so simple, isn't it? So simple. If it shouldn't be like this, it wouldn't be like this. We don't think like that, actually. So that's the difference, that we think an enlightened being has. Their angle on reality really cuts through what is great suffering for us. It's like his advice to Ajahn Brahm when he was sick. You remember that one? He had this typhus fever. Typhus fever. He was very high fever and incredibly weak and just so feeble and everything. Very painful as well. And Ajahn Chah came to see him. What did he say? You'll get better, don't worry, you'll be all right. He just said to him, you'll either die or you'll get better. That's not what you want to hear. When you go to the hospital, you don't want to have somebody say, well, you'll either die or you'll get better. You want something a little bit more reassuring in between. So the usual description, we haven't even got to right view. There's a lot to right view, actually. There are many levels of it. But the standard view, presentation of right view, they often call it a mundane right view. They have this in the commentaries, lokia they call it. I don't like this at all, actually, because it's far from mundane. Because mundane sounds like something everybody would understand or know, which is not the case. So, and Bhikkhu Bodhi has a nice description of it. He says that it's giving and offering, this is right view, offering alms have ethical significance. Good and bad deeds produce their like results. One has a duty to look after one's mother and father. There is rebirth and a world beyond this one. Religious teachers can be found to expound the truth about the world from their own realization. So that's the areas of right view. So it's giving, dana is there, karma is there, the results of good and bad actions of body, speech and mind. Mother and father are there, and rebirth is there. There is another world. This is not the only world. This is not a one-off experience. And there are religious teachers who have experienced the truth, they've understood it, and teach from that realization. That's the essence of right view. So I'd like to talk a little bit about this, because, the wrong view is the opposite to this. So people often may think, giving is a very important thing. Dana is a very important thing in Buddhism. Every day almost, when people bring food at the breakfast and the lunch, I'm mentioning giving, dana. And to me, really, the whole of the Buddhist path is a form of giving. It's a form of giving, from whether it be food or robes that like I'm wearing, whether it be shelter, kutis at Newbury, whether it be medicines in time of sickness, whether it be advice you give to other people, whether it be support you give to somebody who's in a difficult time, listening to them. It can be many things. And of course, the highest form of giving, what's the highest form? We always say it. It's true. Meditation is a form of giving because we develop the mind in good qualities. That's a gift to ourselves and to others. But I was thinking of Sabbadanang Dhammadanang Jinati. This is the highest gift, is the gift of Dhamma, because that's the gift of understanding, of wisdom, seeing through things. It's having an explanation for what we're experiencing, an understanding. So giving is really, really important. One cannot, I think, underestimate the power of giving. And what's more, I think it's one of the best antidepressants. When you give, if you give of yourself, and this is what they, psychologists and others recommend. If you're feeling depressed, to be able to give something to others is a wonderful thing to bring happiness to oneself, to reduce the depression and giving creates a sense of connection to other people. Giving is what is a wonderful antidote for difficult situations you've had with people, when you've got angry with people, upset with people, and later a gift or a kind word or a smile can be such a gift to that person and help repair difficult relationships. So gifts and giving is a very important part of life, an important part of Buddhism. And of course, when we giving is also the direct antidote to wanting things for ourselves, this sort of concern for what we can get out of life, which creates a lot of pressure for us and a lot of disappointments, actually. That's what the craving, what wanting. Usually it's promising a lot, but often it disappoints us. And giving is the opposite. It's going in the opposite direction. We're not thinking of what we want. We're not thinking, I need this, I need that, I want this, I want that, I like this, I don't like that. We're giving, so we're thinking of others. The direction is away from this self-concern, this individualism that we find in society. So this dana, giving, is very important, but to move on. And I mentioned, last year I gave 2 talks, I think, on parents, but in Buddhism, and, I say to people, in right view, samaditi, the Buddha is mentioning parents. That's extraordinary. That he is putting such an emphasis on parents, the significance of parents, the importance of parents. And I think this is something, just to see that he mentions it in right view as the way we see the world, is putting a lot of emphasis on that. And so this is a very, something we find, say, in the society in the West, it's not emphasised, because if you have an idea that you've only got this life, you've been born in this life, then, however it turns out, you can either blame or praise your parents, that's the nurture, or you can blame or praise nature, the DNA. This is how they look at life. If you've only got one life, if you've just come into this life, that's how you look at it. So what tends to happen, mother and father get blamed a lot. They're the villains. Must be. Only, came into this life, and if you have the idea a baby is, just a blank space, and so then mother and father are really responsible for the condition of that baby, the condition that baby turns into, the adult that child turns into, the teenager that child turns into as it grows up. And of course from Buddhism that's not the case. We say that we've all come from previous lives, countless previous lives, and we've brought our conditioning with us. So this conditioning has also linked us to our parents. Often you can hear in the West children say to their parents, "I didn't ask to be born to you." Great exasperation. I don't know what the parents. I don't know what the answer to that is. Probably hard luck, actually. That's probably the answer. I don't know what I'd say if I was a parent in that situation. But of course in Buddhism we say, no, that's not true. You did. Desire, tanha, this wanting, this craving, this brought us to this life. This brought us to the parents we have. So there's a strong connection there. So this is a very important a relationship, probably one of the most important in our lives. And so the Buddha, encouraged us to support our parents in whatever way we can. And the best support, he said, of course, there's the physical side of things, looking after them financially and making sure they have enough food, clothing and shelter, etc. Just the requisites, the necessities of life. But the best thing for him was to establish them in the Dhamma, to give them the gift of the Dhamma, so that if they were parents that were stingy, to encourage them in generosity. If they were parents, our parents are not wise, to try and encourage them towards wisdom. If they don't have confidence in a teaching like the Buddhism, to help them develop that confidence. So all these things, and most importantly, it's wonderful when you read it in the Buddhist text, if you have immoral parents, to develop them, to encourage them, to establish them in sila. That's a very good gift we can give to them. This is the Buddha was saying. But really, as time's going on, karma is one of the also part of right view, and some people don't have an idea of karma, do they? These days people have more of an idea of karma, I think. There's more acceptance. Do you think so? Do you think, yeah, I think there is. There's many different understandings of karma, and certainly the idea that it's destiny, it's fate, is not a Buddhist idea, actually. But karma is part of, the fact that everything comes from a cause and condition that we experience in this life, comes from a cause and condition. And karma is one of those aspects of conditioning that we can see. And so when the Buddha is talking about, in terms of right view, karma, it's just knowing that whatever positive, wholesome things we do, say or think will give rise to a result of a similar nature, a positive result. Anything we do with a negative, unwholesome mind state, any speech, any action will give rise to a result of a similar nature. It's a very simple concept, actually, very simple concept. But how many people really run on that? How many of us understand that really at its depth? And for the Buddha, one of the most, for me too actually, for my practice, one of the most important aspects of right view is knowing the unwholesome, the negative, and the root of the unwholesome, the negative, and knowing the wholesome or the positive, and the root of the wholesome or positive. It seems so obvious, doesn't it? That, surely people know the difference between good and bad. But is that the case? Really? I wonder. Because we see the actions we can undertake by body and speech. We may think from our point of view they're good, but afterwards we can reflect very easily that they were not good, actually. And one of the problems that makes this difficult is this sense of self, isn't it? It's me, I, me, and mine, and that makes it difficult. But also the biggest problem, and I say it often actually, is when we feel right. When we feel right, we can do, say anything, We can do and say anything. And one of the things people don't actually also don't take into account is we make karma by the way we think. And it's pretty obvious after a while, if you can see, if you think in a negative way, this will condition negative mind states. This can condition depression, anxiety, jealousy, anger, rage, hatred, all these things. And the good thing with Buddhism is we say it's up to you what you develop, whether you develop positive things or negative things. But I'll just read a little bit from Venerable Sariputta about right view and the wholesome and the unwholesome. Just a little bit, maybe not all of it. When, friends, a noble disciple understands the unwholesome and the root of the unwholesome, the wholesome and the root of the wholesome, in that way he is one of right view, or she is one of right view, whose view is straight, who has unwavering confidence in the Dhamma and has arrived at this true Dhamma. So this is not a small thing. He's talking about someone who has reached the first stage of enlightenment. That's usually what we call unwavering confidence in the Dhamma. Because why? Why is it unwavering? They know for themselves. They don't have to believe in anything. They don't have to think maybe the Buddha was enlightened, maybe the Dhamma is true, maybe the Sangha some of them are enlightened. They know from their own experience because they have reached that first stage of enlightenment. And I will mention this because it links up with what we did before, when we took the precepts. And what, friends, is the unwholesome? What is the root of the unwholesome? And what is the wholesome? And what is the root of the wholesome? Killing living beings is unwholesome. Taking what is not given, this is good for translation actually, for people who are wondering what it was about. Killing living beings is unwholesome. Taking what is not given is unwholesome. Misconduct in sexual misconduct is unwholesome. Malicious speech is unwholesome. Harsh speech is unwholesome. Gossip is unwholesome. Covetousness, this is like envy, jealousy, is unwholesome. Ill will, this is anger, all these negative states, is unwholesome. Wrong view is unwholesome. This is called the unwholesome. So that gives you an idea. And now, yes, and what is the root of the unwholesome? What is the root of all this? And the Buddha says, greed is the root of the unwholesome. Hate is the root of the unwholesome. Delusion is the root of the unwholesome. This is called the root of the unwholesome. And of course, the wholesome is the opposite, But this is so important because from karma, if you understand there are consequences of our actions by body and by speech and in our mind, then one will think it is worth undertaking this sila. And this sila is very much a protection. I say if we wish to have a really difficult life full of conflict and a complex life, break sila. It's a sure way to live a very, very complicated and difficult life with quite a lot of suffering. And we see that in society, actually. So sila is very much our protection. And Venerable Sariputta ends, and he says, when a noble disciple has thus understood the unwholesome and the root of the unwholesome, that's the negative and where it's coming from, the root, the wholesome and the root of the wholesome, he entirely abandons the underlying tendency to lust. This is like part of greed, isn't it? He abolishes the underlying tendency to aversion. This is part of hate. He uproots the underlying tendency to the view and conceit, I am. This is the view, I am better than other people that I encounter, the same as other people, or worse than other people. Abandons this comparing. And by abandoning ignorance and arousing true knowledge, he she and now makes an end of suffering. In that way, too, a noble disciple is one of right view, whose view is straight, who has unwavering confidence in the Dhamma and has arrived at this true Dhamma. So that's somebody who's actually realised it. So there is no longer really right view. It's become part of their experience, isn't it? In a sense, it is part of who they are. So karma is a very important aspect of right view, but so is rebirth too. And surprising as it may be, there are teachers who downplay karma and rebirth, and I've seen a debate with that Ajahn Brahm with one of these teachers. And it's really interesting. It's really interesting to see. I found it quite extraordinary, actually, that somebody could say that karma and rebirth are not really core parts of the Buddha's teaching. And they have various arguments for it. But to me, in the end, it sort of indicates a lack of confidence in the Buddha as an enlightened being, who may have seen more than we have. That's basically it. We do take on confidence, on faith. But this person, some people who teach like that obviously don't have that confidence. But rebirth is very important because often people have the idea in this, and I'm sure you've encountered people, many people have it, I had it, that this life is it, and after, when it finishes, it's all over, it's finished. And of course, when you have that sort of point of view, it can lead to, thinking, well, whatever leads to my pleasure, that's good. Whatever doesn't, is not good. And it can lead to the fact that one doesn't care about the ethical values one has in life. If we want to get pleasure, we'll go for it. We can do what we like. Because at the end of the day, when we die, it doesn't matter because it's all finished. It's all finished. So someone who has the view that this life is a one-off, and when it finishes, it's all finished, they're less likely to undertake a spiritual path because they think, well, what's the point? Maybe you can experience the happiness in this life. That is the point, actually. You can actually experience happiness in this life by understanding this body and mind, for sure. And actually that is part of the reason that even people who believe in one life only, they can see that, if they reflect on it, that being good, doing good things, saying good things, thinking in a good way, leads to happiness. That's not difficult to see. So we do come across people who have a sense of what's good and bad, even though they believe that the end of the story is when they die. But the other way it often, as I mentioned before, can lead to this hedonism. You know this word, hedonism? This belief that life, the purpose of life, is to get as much pleasure out of it as possible, by whatever means possible. So seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, and touching, all the experience is a big thing, isn't it? People often say that purpose of life is to experience, and usually they're talking about travelling to see things, listening to music, watching videos, tasting wonderful food, all these things, all the sense pleasures. This is what usually they're referring to. And of course this leads away. When we look for our happiness out there, in sight, smells, tastes and touches, we forget actually the happiness is coming. Where is it coming from? In here. These things are not inherently beautiful. We have that saying in English, don't we? Beauty is in the eye of the beholder. So it's coming from us, actually. So this is a very important thing to see, that when we have that idea of, life is just for pleasure, then we will tend not to look for the happiness within. We'll tend not to go there. And also, just to finish off, that there are spiritual teachers who have realised the truth. That's the other aspect of right view. And of course, the Buddha is the one that we're focusing on today, and the Buddha's teachings. And this is part of the wisdom he gave us, is this right view that I'm talking about today. And there are many aspects of that, particularly that things are impermanent. This body and mind are impermanent. And because of that, we cannot find this permanent happiness in this world. in the world of the senses. This is called dukkha, unsatisfactoriness. And because all things that have come into existence are impermanent, cannot last, there is no abiding permanent self in this process. It's all changing. Of course, that's not to say we don't have personalities, we don't have habits, we don't have characteristics, that's for sure, but they're changing and they're not permanent. There's no core to it. So this is what the Buddha is teaching us, the wisdom of anicca, dukkha and anatta. But also the Four Noble Truths is the very, very important aspect of right view, that there is unsatisfactoriness in this life. Anybody here who would argue with that? Are there, sometimes if you say suffering, people say, oh, no, life's not suffering. But if you say unsatisfactoriness, it's much easier for people to see, because that word dukkha, the First Noble Truth, is actually like an umbrella term, isn't it? And it goes from just mild unsatisfactoriness, not getting what we want, to extreme situations of suffering. But also the Buddha was teaching the Second Noble Truth. Where's all these problems coming from? And he's telling us, again and again, that it's coming from our wanting this, wanting to get rid of that. Simple, isn't it? But how many of us are really woken up to that? That actual fact, the difficulties in our life is because we want things to be other than they are, as other than what we're experiencing. They shouldn't be like this. That's what we're thinking. So this is the Second Noble Truth that the Buddha taught. And really, when we practice these Noble Truths, they bring a lot of peace to the mind. They bring a lot of balance to the mind. And I know Ajahn Sumedho, if you've heard of him, an American monk who used to live in England, now living in Thailand. It seems like a big part of his practice is just seeing everything, all his experience through the lens of Dhamma, through the Four Noble Truths. So they're very useful in daily life. So when we encounter a problem, it's very good for us just to stop and say, what do I want? What am I wanting that's causing the problem? What am I wanting to get rid of that's causing the problem? Just to see it from the focus of Dhamma. This is Dhammanupassana. This is part of Satipatthana. Just to ask ourselves, to look at our lives. Because our lives are really, they're Dhamma unfolding if we have got the understanding to see it in that way. So this is very helpful, when we're experiencing difficulties in our lives, problems, to ask that, what do I want? Or what do I want to get rid of? It goes both ways. Sometimes we want things, but other times we want to get rid of things. And this is the Buddha talked about not getting what we want. He called that dukkha, not getting what we want. It's a very good way of describing it. And of course the Third Noble Truth, and this is a solution for all of us, is to give up that wanting or wanting to get rid of. Let go of it, even if we can only let go of it for a moment, and experience peace. Once the fight is finished, the struggle is finished, when we're struggling, fighting with reality, we're going to lose, that's for sure. But if we can let go of that wanting it to be other than it is at the moment, or trying to get rid of something, then we come to peace. And then the Buddha said the Fourth Noble Truth is the way to do it, how to liberate ourselves, to use these Four Noble Truths, how to practice the Four Noble Truths in our daily life. So, and the first one, right view. And it's so important for how we view the world, how we view Dhamma. So I'd like to finish here and just to encourage everyone, myself included, to see how precious this right view is. We don't really appreciate how lucky we are, how fortunate we are to have that bigger picture that so many people don't have, and that the world that most people live in doesn't make sense. It doesn't add up. Why is it like it is? This is the title of the talk, actually. Because for them, they haven't got this extra information, this view from an enlightened mind, this view from someone standing outside of our seemingly complex experience of humanity, being a human being. And we have that picture, that perspective, an enlightened being. That's the great value of a Buddha and these beings that become enlightened, monks, nuns, lay people who become enlightened. They can step out and they can tell us, what's really the situation and give us a few hints. And of course, the Buddha being the Buddha, it's not enough to believe, wow, fantastic, sadhu, sadhu, he did it. That was his wisdom, that was his peace, that was his liberation. It's not ours. So we have to walk the path, we have to investigate things in order to liberate ourselves, to liberate the mind. And we liberate the mind from greed, hatred and delusion. We liberate the mind from being born again and again and again. We liberate the mind from all dukkha, from all unsatisfactoriness. This is what the Buddha, all Buddhas, are offering for us. So we are very, very fortunate. We've heard about this. We're very, very lucky. We've got a window on reality that most people don't have. So may we travel that path, may we investigate that path, and may we experience it, realize it for ourselves. So I'd like to finish there. So sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. So now just a time for, are there any questions, one or two? Hope that was useful. There we are. So hopefully you have now got an idea of why the world is as it is. I'm sure you all have your ideas of why it is as it is, but this is, from perspective of the Buddha, from my own perspective and from perspective of the Buddha. Yeah.
Ajahn, we have two questions. The first question is, how can I know if my spiritual aspiration is not driven by delusion itself? For example, using too much wanting, force or willpower.
Yes, that's a very good question. How can I know if my spiritual life is being driven by aspiration, is being driven by delusion? And of course, I think all, aspirations are usually positive things, aren't they? Like we have the aspiration to practice Buddhism, to practice dana, sila, and we say bhavana, cultivating the mind, develop meditation, develop the insights and become liberated. And we have to, in order to do that, of course, we need a desire to do it. It's a bit of a contradiction, isn't it? And sometimes the Buddha would talk about not tanha. Tanha is always a negative, it's always craving or wanting. But he would talk about chanda. Chanda, it's desire. It's another word for desire. It's very interesting in Buddhism. There are so many words in the Pali vocabulary for mental states, for mental, fine distinctions between mental states. We don't have them in English because we're not focused on the mind so much. But we have this chanda, which can be a positive thing. Wanting to become enlightened is a positive thing. But eventually, of course, on that path, if we have to give up that desire too along the way. But it gets us on the path, it gets us to practice. And the way we can know if our aspirations are leading are fueled by delusion, are coming from delusion, is the result of how we're practicing. This is always the way we can check up with our practice of the Noble Eightfold Path. It's very simple. It's always checking to see, is this a positive thing that's coming up in my life or a negative thing? Are the results that I'm experiencing positive or negative? If they are negative, if for instance one is putting in too much effort, too much striving, too much willpower into the meditation, one will see the results because the meditation, there will be tension in the mind, one won't feel relaxed, the peace may not be possible, there may be some restlessness, all these things. So one checks up from one's experience, is this leading to more wholesome states, leading to more positive states or not? And then from that to adjust the practice. And the famous example, isn't it, is the simile of the lute. Venable's advice to Venerable Sona. He was a monk at the time of the Buddha, and he was the foremost in striving, and you could say really overdoing it. He was overdoing it. But he came from a very wealthy family, and according to the commentaries, I don't think it's in the Buddhist teaching, he even had, this is bizarre for me, hair on the soles of his feet. And they said it was because he was so used to being carried around. We came from a very wealthy family. He didn't walk. So these hairs developed. I thought that's really peculiar. But he made up for it when he became a monk, because he heard the Buddha's teachings, got confidence of faith, and then he ordained, he went forth, which is the usual sequence, often the usual sequence. And then he overdid it. He was doing walking meditation day and night, and as you would expect, well, I would expect, with these rather delicate feet, they started to get damaged and started to bleed, and it was really painful for him. But he kept up this practice, and then when it became too much, he thought, well, I'm not up to it. I might as well disrobe and go back to the lay life and do good. I'll do good. I can support the Buddha and the teachings of the Buddha and so on. And the Buddha somehow was aware of his mind, and he came to Venerable Sona, and he said, Sona, did you ever play a lute? These are stringed instruments. And he said, what happens when the strings are really tight? And Venerable Sona said, well, it's a terrible sound. It's not the good pitch, you say, not a good pitch, not a good sound. And then the Buddha said, well, what happens when the strings are very loose? He said, oh, that's terrible too. You don't get a very good sound at all. And he said, in the same way, Sona, balance your practice, not too tense, not too tight, and not too loose. And this is very practical advice for him, he said to use the meditation object or subject that he was using, maybe the walking, but to do it with a very balanced way, not too tight and not too loose. And this is true for our lives. So this is some advice that the Buddha gave about how we can tell whether our aspirations are being driven by delusion. Basically, we'll get suffering, dukkha, unsatisfactoriness, and we'll start to think what to do, what's happening, and then we can work out whether it's a positive thing or it's obviously a negative thing in that case. Then we can make the adjustments. Yeah. So thank you. Where was that one? Was that from Melbourne or? It's always interesting to me. Doesn't say. Oh.
The second question is, what is the subtle difference between letting go and letting be?
Oh, right.
Especially regarding unpleasant thoughts or painful sensations.
Right, yeah. What's the difference between letting go and letting be? It's probably just a few letters. but no, I think there is a bit of difference, because the trouble with letting go is that it sounds like something we're doing, doesn't it? It sounds a bit too active. When you say letting be, it's much more passive, the sense, well, just let things be. But actually letting go is pretty much that, allowing things to be as they are. But maybe letting go can also be more active in the sense, particularly in Sila, when we say no to things. And when we, that's a possibility. We say no to things. We see something on the internet that looks very attractive, as many things do, and we think, oh, I'll go to that. But we know, it probably won't lead to anything good, so we can say no to it. But when we say no to things in Buddhism, in Sila, we're saying no from happiness, from the sense that if I say yes, it'll actually lead to problems and unhappiness. If I say no, that's actually protecting me and leading to happiness. So we're letting go. So there is some active forms of letting go that hinge on being able to say no. Actually, this is a very important quality, to restrain, refrain, not do that thing. So the big difference to me is letting be is perhaps more passive, but they come down in meditation to very similar ability. You know, when we let go, we are actually in tune with the third noble truth, which is we're letting go of wanting things to be different from what they are. You know, we're letting go of, in meditation, well, you know, I'm restless, you know, maybe the body's painful and we're reacting to that, or there can be doubts going. Letting go of these things means that we are letting go of that wanting things to be. I don't want to be restless, I don't want to be these other states. And we let go of that. And when we let go of that, then the mind can come to peace, then the fight is over. So this is letting go and letting be. They're very similar, but I always like letting be, actually. It's more my character. Because letting go sounds too active in a way, in a meditation, in terms of meditation. So thank you very much for that question. And now is that it? I think that's it.
While the microphone's here, can I ask a question as well?
Yes, certainly. It's just 1:45. Yeah.
You talked at the start of the talk. You talked about it shouldn't be, and I understand there's like a resistance to what is happening in life,
Yes,
and drags you out of the present moment. But at the same time, there's been a lot of positive change that has happened out of the shouldn'ts. If you look at movements such as the Me Too movement, corruption, many positive changes that have happened in society as a result of that. So when is it appropriate for the shouldn't? When is the shouldn't appropriate?
Right. I think in those cases you're quite right. When there's injustices happening, things like that, like Me Too and so forth, are a good response to it. But the first thing is to realise that at the moment they are like this. That's the reality. And it's really when we fight with reality and say it shouldn't be like this at this moment, that there is a problem, that we cannot come to peace in the present moment. However, we can always, take action in the future, go towards something that is better. If we can contribute to something, a better plan of action can help with a problem in society, then we should. There we are. We should do it. No, we should. But in the sense that very, very important, this comes back to a very central issue regarding activism too. It is good to take action, when we see something that is not right, we consider is not right. And if we have something positive to offer, that's very good. However, one of the things that is a trap for activists of every type, actually, is that they can come from a place that is not good, not wholesome. Many activists I've been talking the last few days about it, come from a sense of ill will, a hatred. They're using the energy of having an issue to get energy to fight this. They talk about fighting this injustice and so on. And often, I remember, it was really lovely, one of a Quaker friend of mine was talking to me about some peace activists, and she said to me, "My goodness, they were the most unpeaceful people I know." They were so fired up. And I've heard this about some environmentalists too, that they can be so fired up that it's coming from a sense of anger, and that is not a very useful, it's not a good means to an end, It's always good if we can come from non-greed, non-hatred, non-delusion. And non-delusion, the biggest of course is ourselves, sometimes the sense of me and I and who I am, and this is my cause, I'm pushing it, I'm identified with it. So I don't know if that answered it. I think some people may like that and may not like that answer actually, but so it's important, yes, that we address problems that come up. And I was talking about climate change last week and what we can do. So no, it is important we do something, but we do it from a wholesome state of mind, a positive state of mind, to achieve a good end, a good outcome. So that's what I would say, yes. But in meditation, particularly, and when we're developing sati, mindfulness, the shoulds and the shouldn'ts don't apply, because we're talking about the experience of the present. That's here. It's arrived as it is. So that's the situation that these shoulds and shouldn'ts just disturb that present moment. We're in a fight with reality, you know. So that's in a meditation context. In a social context, it's more difficult. And I think that's a good question, actually. But we must, you know, as spiritual practitioners, do what we can do, you know, within our scope. That's a very important thing that we should do. And I'm very impressed, you know, I think, from Buddhist terms, that someone like Greta Thunberg, who's doing a lot on climate change, there's an enormous karma for her to be able to be the person at the moment who can create a lot of awareness about climate change. Hopefully more positive than negative. I hear that she has her critics. I didn't realise quite a few critics. So, yes, we must do what we can and within our capabilities, but to do it in a wholesome way. So when I saw Greta Thunberg giving the UN address, and she was so angry, shaking, I thought, oh my goodness, I don't know. I thought, you know, part of our lives is the message is the means we're using to achieve things. But I think she was perhaps, I hope, trying to make an impression. She certainly made an impression. And I thought, my goodness, it was amazing that she could keep it together. When you're very angry, it's very hard to get words together, to hold it together. So she did quite a good job. So thank you for that, Sriju. Yeah, thank you. So I think now we better finish off. And you're all welcome to attend the dharana next door, and the offering of food and a shared meal, communal lunch. And now we can, those who would like to, pay respects to the Buddha, Dhamma and Sangha. Thank the Buddha for the right view. Yes, Ranjit?
Excuse me, before you leave, you know Bhikkhu Samahita?
Yes, I do. Yes.
Very sad news.
Yes, I have heard that news.